we want to really talk about our way. It's different, right? And it's really an identity of how the program is built around our core values of relationship, growth, and victory. So if you were trying to give people a high-level view of what that looks like in the room, and they were potentially their recruits or signees that we want to come, how would you present those three values to them?
Relationships, growth, and victory, if you think back to your college experience, whether you participated in athletics or not, those were three of the most important things that went into you having a successful experience, an enjoyable experience. The relationships are why you're here today, right? I mean, you came back to be around each other. You came back to reminisce.
I can applaud for that.
And it's really what binds our guys together. I get asked so many times, how do you get your guys to come back in the midst of this craziness of the transfer portal? For example, did you know 48% of basketball players at the Division I level put their name in the transfer portal? So that's 1 and 2 about. And the number one reason is relationships. The growth, if you think back to your experience here, how much you transformed going from a 17, 18-year-old kid coming in here, not really knowing what you didn't know, to someone that by the time you left had more purpose, had more vision, had more empathy, had more perspective. Well, that's what we're trying to do as well, just, again, like Mike said, using basketball as a vehicle. And then the victory part, and I think this applies to you all and folks that, whether they play basketball or another sport or no sport, we're all trying to win in whatever it is that we're doing. We're all trying to find success as a person, as a performer. And for us, obviously that's most easily measured, at least publicly, with wins and losses and statistics. But honestly, more important than that is seeing the transformation that these guys make and then seeing the success that they find. I think of a guy like Stevie Mitchell, who just graduated a couple weekends ago. Stevie's a 2-time academic All-American. He was a Big East Scholar Athlete of the Year. I could unveil a list of his accomplishments, but it would be like Santa Claus's list. It would just kind of roll down. But you know what I'm most impressed with Stevie about? We try really hard to get our guys to think about life beyond basketball, even though a lot of them have a one-track mind. They want to play in the NBA, which, believe it or not, I played Division III basketball, but I wanted to play in the NBA. That was me. And it was very, very difficult to get me at that age to think about anything but that. And so Stevie's no different, but Stevie's so smart. And one of the biggest expressions of victory, in my opinion, is watching Stevie Mitchell interact with some of the most accomplished, impressive folks there are, whether it's in Milwaukee, in the Marquette community, or beyond. I'll give you a couple examples. We have a very, very generous donor that's, led the charge for the last several years in supporting our program. This guy has a business that's in the, 10 figures in terms of the valuation of his business. He and Stevie Mitchell sitting across from each other, which they've done several times, they can just talk as equals. That's victory to me. This is a young man who's destined for success. And yeah, he participated in a lot of wins here. He was a big part of our Big East championship team, our Sweet 16 team. But more importantly, I think he's set up to be successful in life. The last thing I'll say about relationships, growth, and victory, and you all know this in your adult lives and even as you look back to college, they're not three core values that are each in its own vacuum. They impact each other. So for us, relationships are important, in and of themselves, but they're also important because they drive growth and they drive victory. Our guys are over in the Al McGuire Center right now working out together. They're working on their growth together. This is a long, hard journey as it is. If you try to do it by yourself without the benefit of the relationships, I would argue it's impossible. And as I've learned over the years, relationships are required to drive victory. In other words, there's only a certain extent that an individual will go to for himself or herself or on his own or her own. But if you have someone else that you're doing it for, a group of people that you care about, that you love, that you know loves and cares about you, that you trust, you'll go that extra mile. And so that's why those are the three most important things to us.
Yeah, please.
We got to bring you in to spend more time around us because you lead the charge with applause. So
we love your energy.
We love these type of folks.
I think I want to dispel the concept of anti-portal and being pro-retention, and why we view pro-retention as the way, the advantages of it. And then I want to say this too, because you talked about it with the relationship piece, the intentionality that goes into that, and the intentionality I've seen. So if you could just talk a little bit about that.
For sure. And I'm sure in this room there's probably varying levels of knowledge and interest in this type of stuff. There are some folks that may just say, I just want to watch the games. I don't really care about
that would be lovely.
All those little details. And then there's probably one or two in here that maybe know even more than me about all the details of the transfer portal and all the stuff that happens in the offseason. College athletics have undergone a major shift, not just in basketball, but I would argue the effect on basketball has probably been even more significant than other sports. And so, as I mentioned, roughly 1 in 2 kids now are putting their name in the transfer portal after the season. There are, believe it or not, think about this weekend and juxtapose this weekend for you all with this strange fact. There are student athletes, not just in basketball, but in other sports, that literally spend each year of their college career at a different college or university. And so if that was the case, where would you go for alumni weekend? That would be bizarre. For us, we are not against transfers. Tyler Kolek was a transfer. Omax Prosper was a transfer. Those guys were really good for us. But we are in favor of, and I actually got this from Travis Diener, who I think is as thoughtful and as good of representative of Marquette basketball and Marquette University as we've had in our program in the last few decades. And Travis said to me, this was a few years ago before all this stuff got really, really crazy. He said, I just think it makes sense to reward the guys who have worn the jersey. And I thought about that, and I think about that often, and it just makes a lot of sense. 3 years ago, how the pictures come up on your phone, like this date? So 3 years ago, on this very date, we were coming off of our first season. We had a nice season, did better than most people thought. We made the NCAA tournament, but we wanted more. We wanted better. We wanted to keep making strides. Our top returning player by far was an all-conference player, first-team All-Big East player. He had put his name in the NBA draft. Not the transfer portal, the NBA draft. And actually 3 years ago today was the deadline where he had to decide, do I keep my name in the NBA draft or do I pull it out and come back to Marquette? And so we were all on pins and needles. We wanted him back, because for obvious reasons. This guy would have been preseason player of the year in the Big East. And he stayed in the draft. And so this day, 3 years ago, it was a challenging day because it felt like a little bit of a setback. The next year, we won the Big East regular season and tournament. And the reason we won is because we chose to prioritize the guys who had worn the jersey that wanted to come back, which was everyone else who wasn't a senior. And those guys got so much better in that offseason 3 years ago. In fact, I'm meeting with our guys coming up here. This week is the first week of our official workout. Some of our guys have been around for a little while, but the official, we get 8 weeks in the summer to work with our guys on the court, starts on Monday. And so I'm meeting with our guys, and I'm using that summer as a template for us in a lot of ways. Once you start bringing in, to answer your question, Mike, a bunch of transfers, It doesn't happen in a vacuum. You know, it impacts your roster, it impacts your program. We have made a decision and a commitment to the guys in our program. We have 9 players that came back from last year's team. 8 of them played, and 7 of them played, and 2 of them redshirted because Sean Jones, it kind of race against time. He wasn't able to play, even though in practice there was a lot of days where like, man, we wish this guy would play. But those guys have all come back, and then we've got 4 freshmen that are so excited and eager that are here. And we feel like, yes, we could have gone in the transfer portal and recruited some guys, but we feel like it would have stunted their growth. And we feel like if we value growth, then that would be a contradiction. And we feel like we can be a lot better than people think without taking transfers. And we proved that 3 years ago. There was a lot of people that were questioning us of why at that time we didn't go into the transfer portal and replace the 4 really good players that we lost off of our first team here. But we had a plan, we had a way, we stuck to it. Even losing Justin Lewis by him not coming back and keeping his name in the NBA draft. It's all about growth. If the guys can grow and become what we believe they can become, they're going to be better than the transfer in the long run. Just like Oso Ighodaro became, just like Cam Jones became. But it is certainly a delayed gratification. It's not instant oatmeal. It doesn't happen in a microwave. It takes time, and we have time. That's what we're here to do. We're not here for a quick fix. We believe that Marquette is the place to be. You guys came back here because it felt good to be here when you went to school here, and it feels good to be back, right? And so, one of the things Mike and I talk about all the time as it relates to our staff and the athletic department staff is everyone that works for us was chosen to be at Marquette. Everyone in this room at one point was admitted to Marquette many, many years ago. So you were chosen to be here. At the same time, everyone that works for us chooses each day to come to Marquette, to walk into those doors, and to bring the best version of yourself. And at any time, those folks can choose not to do that. I choose to come here. I love it here. I love Lake Michigan. We just got to go on a run in honor of Dr. Lovell.
You ran.
This morning. And we're running, and one of our players, Caden Hamilton, and I were running next to each other. And he's a much more impressive guy running than me because he's about 250 pounds, 6'9". And we're running up this hill, and we look to our right, and there's this beautiful lake. And it's like, wow, we're on a planet, and we're in Milwaukee, and we're at Marquette. This is awesome.
Doubling on that, and you talked about that summer. It's interesting after that first year, and I think that summer, I spent a lot of time in the gym, probably more time than I should, but I love being there. I love being around our guys and watching their commitment to their own growth and then your commitment to their growth really hardened for me how important player development is, and then how well you and your staff have done it since you've gotten here, probably better than I've seen in my 22 years. And you take a ton of pride in it, but importantly, the kids individually take a ton of pride in it. So can you just talk about cultivating that level of pride in player development for both of you as a staff and the kids?
It's so much fun. Seeing someone grow, seeing someone become a better version of themselves, that's really why I coach. I was raised by a single mom, and I didn't have my dad around, and so coaches put their arm around me, and they helped me become a better version of myself. And so that's why I got into coaching, in addition to my maniacal desire to win. I have both. So, I love seeing these guys grow. We were running today, and 2 of our graduate assistants were with us. And these guys just transitioned from being on our team, and they graduated earlier this month, and now they're on our coaching staff. And when you're a graduate assistant, your number one job is to be available and accessible for the players. Whether it's to pass and rebound for them, whether it's a shoulder to cry on. Yes, our guys cry sometimes. Whether it's just direction, whatever it may be. And so one of our graduate assistants, he said to me, it is so much fun when I'm rebounding for one of our guys, and he talked about one of our last year's freshmen, and then I get to see him in the game go do what we worked on. And so that's the development that you're talking about, Mike. Sean Jones came up with, the players always come up with way better stuff than we do as coaches. So Sean Jones said, hey, coach, they got the transfer portal, we got the transformation portal. Yeah, pretty good. Pretty good. But again, it doesn't, it's not, just add water. It requires extreme work. It requires dedication. There's a level of luck involved in helping a guy take an explosive jump. I think any person or player can make gradual progress, gradual. Every once in a while you see, this happened with Oso Ighodaro, a guy go like that, and you're like, well, I didn't think he was even any good, and now he's one of the best. And so how, those, I always thought he was good, but some people didn't. Those are kind of, those come from grace. Those are not the norm, but those can happen through relationships, through a synergy amongst people, and that's what we're going after. But make no mistake about it, it's a matter of maniacal work ethic and intentionality towards where we want to grow and where we want to improve. It's not just, well, let's just go in a gym and spend an hour in there. We have to be very, very specific.
You mentioned grace, and you coaches can do that for the kids and their development, but you also talked about instant gratification, and the kids are chasing that so much.
Yes.
So how do you get the kids in that, in that relationship that you have with them? How do you get them to give grace to themselves through that development process?
Well, isn't that the hardest thing for all of us? I mean, who woke up this morning gripped with anxiety?
Well, first of all, these guys this group didn't wake up till about 10 o'clock this morning. So right now they're gripped with Starbucks.
So listen, it is for all of us. It's a two-step process if you want to be great. The first step is being okay. So when I got up this morning gripped with anxiety, I had to be okay first. I had to get okay. So I went outside, I walked around, I realized I'm on a planet, and there's certain things going on that are a lot more important than me. That helped. Then I did my meditation, okay, which helps, okay? Then I did my morning reading, which again reminded me, do you know that our galaxy's been around for 13.8 billion years? Okay, so we get to sit up here and talk about Marquette basketball. That's pretty cool. So now, once I can be okay, now I can go after doing something great. And that applies to our players, except our players are 18 to 22. So think back to when you were that age, and they're just trying to figure it out and be comfortable in their own skin, and it's different for every guy. We see these guys on game night, and they look so imposing and athletic and big and strong, but they're young kids. We got one that just got here that's 17, and his mom and dad left on Thursday. And they came in my office, and his mom, she looked me in the eye, as only a mom can do. And she said, Coach, my son is 17 years old. Please keep him safe. And, those moments as a coach, it's like, because you know that not everything's under your control. It's like, that's a heck of a responsibility. But I think this goes hand in hand with retention. It goes hand in hand with trust that we need and want to cultivate. Is we're trying to first help these guys be okay as people, and then go after something great as students, as athletes, and in life.
You talked about the seniors, or we got a photo of the seniors from graduation day, and you talked about Steve Mitchell, and we talked about character and where it fits in our way, and how it absolutely it's part of the pathway. And I'm curious, when you go through the recruiting process and you think about character, versatility of what guys are like, not just in basketball. And talk to me about how you identify that, or you and the staff try to identify that, and then how you connect that for those kids who, like, if we go back to Instagram, they want to win.
Yeah.
But how you turn that uniqueness in them into them understanding that is your pathway to victory.
One of the things that is really helpful for me, hopefully for our staff, is I wrote out a long recruiting philosophy. It's like 37 pages. It's really long. And I have to update it every so often because the rules keep changing and the dynamics involved in high school and grassroots and college basketball keep changing. But the very first part of that recruiting philosophy is the most important part. And it's quite simply labeled objectives of the recruiting process. And then there's two sections of that part. The first section is what we want out of the recruiting process. And the second section is what we don't want out of the recruiting process. And if you read it, you would think it is so common sense. It's so much just common sense. But it's amazing how sometimes programs set themselves up for what they don't want because of the way they go about the recruiting process. Because if you think about it, if there were only 5 people in this room that were talented enough to go do what we all want to go do, those people would be in incredible demand. And those people would know that. And the people around them would know that. Well, that's recruiting. There are a very, very small number of people that can come in here to Marquette and compete in the Big East and be sturdy enough as people and as a player to go do that. The place we start, to be honest, Mike, is their parents. You guys know that commercial where it's like about turning into your parents? Well, there's an element of truth in that. I mean, we like to say the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. And there's a real magnetic pull, I believe, towards what you've been taught and what's been instilled in you, and then what their trajectory is. I think that's very, very important. Oso Ighodaro was on a good trajectory, even though he came in here and played 38 minutes his entire freshman year. He was still on a good trajectory. Why? Because he didn't start playing basketball until 9th grade. And because his body was changing, and because he had a real mind. And so we tried to recruit him. I was at Texas when he was coming out of high school, and it came down to Marquette and Texas. Aren't you glad he chose Marquette? I am. But you know, short story about him and parents. When I got the job here, COVID was going on, and the guys were all at home. I'm not talking about at Humphrey Hall. They were at home. Like Oso was in Phoenix. Justin Lewis was in Baltimore. Dawson Garcia was in Minneapolis. So all the guys were home doing classes online because the season had just finished. And at that time, all the classes had moved online. It was a chance for them to, get a little bit of a break after a long season. There had been a coaching change. So one of my first jobs was I needed to fly and go see those guys, to meet with them and see, are you still going to be at Marquette? Like, are you going to stay here, or are you going to put your name in the transfer portal? And these guys were all strangers to me, and I was a stranger to them, except to Oso, who we had recruited when I was at Texas. And so I went to Baltimore to see Justin Lewis. I went to Minneapolis to see Dawson Garcia. I went to Iowa to see DJ Carton. I went to Phoenix to see Oso. I almost went to Syracuse, New York to see Samir Torrance, but fortunately my cell phone rang 10 minutes before I got on a plane, and he said, Coach, sorry, but I'm gonna be transferring to Syracuse. And I said, well, thanks for saving me the trip. But anyway, when I went to see Oso, there was 9 guys that I went to see. When I went to see Oso, I had breakfast with him and his mom in Phoenix. And it was so striking, the difference from the other 8 guys in his level of appreciation for Marquette. The way that he felt about Marquette is the way that you feel about Marquette. The faculty, the students, things outside of basketball. And he had just been here during a COVID year, so he didn't have the full experience. But that really struck me. I said, you know what, this guy's got a chance to be a real Marquette guy. And then 3 years later, he got his second degree from here. He was academic All-American. He was picked in the NBA draft. He was Big East Scholar Athlete of the Year. He won the most prestigious award in our athletic department. And now he plays for the Phoenix Suns. That's victory.
Yeah. So we've been in the NIL era for a couple of years. We're probably a month away, depending on if we get a settlement approval here from the revenue sharing era. And it's changing conversations that you have with current players, prospective players, and their families, and really challenging, I would imagine, our way. You just talk a little bit how those conversations have changed and how you try to bring it back to, it's got to be more than that for you.
I have a lot to say about that. Understand, with all these questions, I could talk to you guys for hours about each question, so I try to summarize it down into a relatively short answer. I used to work for a coach that was like a father figure to me, Oliver Purnell, at Clemson University. And he used to say to me, Shaka, we're in a daily fight for the hearts and minds of our players. I was 29 years old, and I remember thinking, it's kind of dramatic. But now I know, actually, we are in an hourly fight for the hearts and minds of our players. And so to answer your question, we want people to want to be at Marquette, whether it's because they were recruited to come here out of high school or guys that are currently here. We want guys to want to be here for those three reasons on the screen. We still have to execute what goes into winning. We still have to, we always say performance is talent minus interference. So we still have to get interference out of the way, mental clutter. Got to deal with that anxiety that we wake up with in the morning. But absolutely, we believe it's still possible to have people that want to be here for those three reasons. Is NIL and that financial component now a factor? It absolutely is. I think back to when I played, and I played at Division III Kenyon College.
We didn't get any pictures of that up here, but I know there are pictures of that.
Yeah,
He was a beast.
We'll
go
keep
online,
those,
go Google it.
Keep those off the screen. I didn't play in front of crowds like that. But I put myself, so I grew up in a home with a single mom. My mom and I were just talking about that. She's here visiting. 3 brothers that I grew up with. Tough situation from a financial standpoint. I still remember the exact amount that our rent was. And I remember my mom having to really, really make sure that we were intentional financially to make sure that we had enough money to pay that rent. And so I put myself in our guy's shoes or in a young 16-year-old star high school athlete's shoes that now he has the chance to change his family's situation or position because of these changes in the rules. And so it's really, it's a nuance, it's an art, it's not a science. For me to call that kid up and say, hey, that stuff doesn't matter, focus on relationships, growth, and victory, you don't want to come across as tone deaf. But I think it's possible to still attract, families that understand over the course of the long term, these are the things that are most important for my son. This is the experience that I want them to have. The examples of Tyler Kolek, Omax Prosper, Oso Ighodaro, who are in the NBA, the examples of even a Dwayne Wade, who's a generation before, and what he's done as a player, but also more importantly as a person and off the court. Those are still powerful examples that we can use and point to because some of these young men are putting themselves in positions where if you make a decision strictly based on the financial component and you don't get those things and you don't get the mentoring and guidance you need, then when college is over, what do you have? We have a lot of conversation to answer your question about this stuff, and it's ever evolving, but we're fortunate to have guys that want to be here for those reasons.
One of your core principles, cultural principles, is we're better together. And we hear constantly from our fans, Marquette Nation, like, how can we help you? And certainly you do it in amazing ways, buying tickets. See the line down at the Spirit Shop. Thank you for that. We appreciate that. Those of you that have the ability, you've helped us philanthropically. But how can they be reinforcers of this vision of our way of relationships, growth, and victory?
I was hoping you would ask that question.
I assumed.
Because I've been thinking about this a lot. I really do. I really have been thinking about this a lot. And I think that there's nothing too small for what you can do. I'll give you an example. There's quite a few folks here from the Chicago area. In fact, I believe currently around 40% of our student body is from Chicagoland. So hugely important area for Marquette University. And we finally, after many years, have a player that's joining our program from Chicagoland, Ian Militic. And this is an example of there's never anything that's too small. Did you know that one of the things that impacted Ian as he was going through his recruiting process is that on his street, might be a neighbor or maybe right down the street, there is a home that proudly displays a Marquette flag. And so every day Ian would walk by that flag. And it's a powerful thing. And so the metaphor, the metaphorical answer to your question is wave the flag. Put up a flag. Now, are there different ways you can do that? Absolutely. I mentioned Chicago. We are playing 3 games in Chicago this year. So one of the things you can do is come to those games. Come to those games. We play Indiana on, you got the date memorized.
November 9th.
November 9th. It's a Sunday.
Yep.
It's a Sunday. And we play them in the United Center, so where the Bulls play, Michael Jordan Stadium. And you know what I'd love to see? More blue and gold than crimson and cream. Wouldn't that be cool? That'd be cool. So obviously coming to the games, whether they're here, whether they're in Chicago, we've got some awesome fans that come with us to faraway places. When we go to the NCAA tournament, it does mean a lot when you're there. A couple other things to answer your question. We talk about this a lot in our staff. Actually, Ben, stand up if you don't mind. So this is Ben Retzloff. Yes. So Ben works like right outside of my door. He has a table that he sits at. And Ben, he helps us, he wears a lot of hats in our program. And one of the things he helps us with is kind of the strategic messaging for our program. And we believe our messaging, the most important group of people that we're messaging is our own players, even when it's external messaging. But certainly you all are important as well, our fans, our alums. And so we want to try to keep doing a better and better job with messaging our way. Because even some of the things that we've talked about in the last half hour, maybe for some of you, you didn't know, or maybe that kind of filled in a blank about, well, why do they do things this way, or why do they do things that way? So since you were nice enough to be here today, spread the word. Because I think the more alignment that we have throughout Marquette Nation about our way, who we are, why we do things the way we do, then the easier it is for us to be on one accord moving forward. And I think that we say be the difference, right? Do you really believe that? Yes. Because if you do, that's what we're doing. We are completely different than 99.9% of programs out there. Now, that doesn't necessarily guarantee us to be better, but walk with us as we try to be the difference. And understand that there's going to be delayed gratification sometimes. There's going to be guys you might look at and say, well, he's not very good. Like you might have done when you watched Oso Ighodaro in 2021, when he played 38 total minutes. But just trust in us that we have a plan and we have a commitment to that plan, that if we stay with it, not every player is going to become an NBA draft pick. Not every player is going to become the Big East Scholar Athlete of the Year. Not every player is going to become an academic All-American. Not every year are we going to win the Big East, but we are going to do those things on a pretty regular basis if we can continue to focus on relationships, growth, and victory, and if we have Marquette Nation behind us.
We talk a lot about what we're proud of the program and what the program means to the university. I don't know if I've ever asked you, what are you most proud of?
So I think for all of us, the number one question in our lives is, who am I? And I tell our guys often, you can't really figure out who you are until you can cross some of the things off the list in terms of figuring out who you're not. And, you know, fortunately or unfortunately, you know, in this world, in this life, when you play a sport, when it's a sport that gets a lot of attention, a lot of times the messages that you can get from the external world are actually feeding into all the things that deep down really aren't you. And so that's a very confusing and challenging process. But what I'm most proud of is when these guys really realize who they are.
Well, I want to thank you for being here. We're going to let Coach get out of here. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.